Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pro Wrestling Inside and Out Live. We are a little early, but we thought we had a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about anything wrestling. I mean, anything wrestling and the WWE. We don't know if wrestling and WWE goes together, but we're going to talk about those. We're going to talk about whatever. If you're watching this and you want to ask some questions, send your questions in. Anything wrestling. We don't have a subject today. We're going to talk about everything. We're going to talk about the territories. We're going to talk about booking. We're going to talk about bookers. We're going to talk a little bit about all things wrestling. As I said, if you have a question, you can send those questions in. Me and Jack will try to answer them. And if we don't know what they are, we'll make them up, or we'll find out. No, we'll find out whether or not we'll ask the question to the person that needs to get to. But let's first talk WrestleMania. I think we need to speak about that just for a minute, and I think let's look at day one first. Jack, what did you think about day one of WrestleMania?
Well, as we were discussing pre-show here, their pre-show featured something I don't think most people were expecting. That was an actual professional wrestling match. Cesaro and Drew Gulak, man, that was some of the best in-ring wrestling I have seen in an awful long time. And it set a great tone for me personally. I've seen people say that was the worst match of the card, but, and I guess if Firefly Funhouse was your apex, then, that probably is your bottom of the card. But, I loved all the matches. I mean, those folks put so much passion into what they're doing. And, you can set and pick apart, but if you can't sit back and see, how hard they work, then you're missing the whole point of what this industry is all about. As a fan, you're missing that.
I agree.
I loved it.
I agree. And I watched, now was Daniel Bryan, he was on the second night, wasn't he?
Second night, I believe.
It was the second night. The first night, I kind of liked The Undertaker and AJ Styles. I would have done I've done a little bit more believability into the thing, but I thought it was well produced, well done. Yeah. I probably wouldn't have let The Undertaker beat up 12 guys in masks, but other than that, I think he should have maybe had 12 of his other people to make it make sense and run them away, and then then bring the other two guys in. I think there could have been a little bit of better storytelling, but as far as the way they produced it, the way they presented it, I have no problem. And believe me, I'm so old school. I started, I grew up in the 70s and worked in the 80s in the wrestling business and the early 90s, and so. I mean, I could understand actual wrestling fans or older wrestlers saying, "Oh man, what in the world are they doing?" But I didn't have a problem with it because let's face it, the WWE is not professional wrestling, and I think we talked about that. Tell the people the difference between professional wrestling and the WWE.
Well, Vince is he's there for entertainment. He from the get-go. He was stressing that. We're not real. We're giving you all this strictly as an entertainment value. Yeah. Back in the day, we pushed professional wrestling being real, and it worked back then. It did. That day's come and gone. But still, even today, you can look back and there's a big difference. Professional wrestling is more about storytelling. Today, it's about popping those crowds, and keeping your viewership up, which, as much as I like the Cesaro Gulak match, I know why they put it on the pre-show, because most people are not going to stay invested in a match like that very long. So it was kind of a throwaway match to them, but it was also, kind of saying, hey, look, we can still do this stuff too if we want to. But, and I say this, and I hurt my own feelings when I say it, but if what we did still drew, we'd still be doing it. You know, the world changed. As much as I hate it, the world changes and tastes change. And, you know, you can sit and watch old tapes and be satisfied, or you can watch some of the new stuff and find stuff you like there. And I choose to do that.
You know, I agree with that. WWE, I think the way I always looked at it was that professional wrestling had believability to it.
Yeah.
And WWE has no believability to it. You're not even supposed to believe what they're doing. And I think that the territories made you believe it. When the bookers sat down and they came up with an angle and they came up with something for people to watch, what they would essence do and said, listen, we have to believe, the people have to believe, it has to make sense. Now, I will tell you that when the late 80s come along, even the wrestling companies themselves, the professional wrestling companies, the National Wrestling Alliance, and a bunch of wrestling companies, they did start going out in left field sometime where the believability was gone. So they even started it. It really, the believability came in the 70s. If you watch wrestling in the 70s, everything they did was believable. And then you get into the 80s, the late 80s, stuff started becoming, even in professional wrestling, became not that believable. And I think still today, though, you can make people invest into the progress in the program. And I believe they can still believe while they're watching it. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to believe it when they leave. But maybe you can make them believe. And I don't think WWE even does that. I don't think they want you to believe that anything they're doing is real. Let me catch up with some people real quick. Bristol Cash, Roman, what's up, guys? Do you know?
I do. Bristol's one of my referees till he abdicated his throne and moved to Dothan, and I've got him set up with some guys down there, so he's still refereeing.
All right, Richard Stewart, where can someone get Top Line of the Wrestling gear? Well, I think Jack can hook you up there. Do you know this guy?
Yeah.
Richard Stewart. Do you know Richard Stewart?
Yeah.
Shannon, Kathleen Moore. Hey, Jack and Brent. Hello, Shannon.
Hey, Shannon.
Thank you so much for coming on here. We got Pat Rose watching today. Pat! He'll watch. He just won't come on here for some reason.
I know. I'm going to go kidnap him, and we're going to come up there one night.
You know, hey, I've got it set up now, Pat, that you don't have to worry about getting online and like me and Jack are doing. We can just talk on the phone. I did get that lined up. I actually used it for Jerry Stubbs Thursday night. Kevin Tubbs says wrestling was entertaining, sports entertainment not so much. I think it's the way you have to look at it. I'll tell you what Jack told me one time, and he was the one that said this to me. He said, you need to watch the WWE, but don't watch it like it's professional wrestling. Be entertained by what they're giving you. And I think after he told me that, I think I looked at it and said, okay, let me watch it and just be entertained by it. Because what happens, I think, and Jack, you probably know this more than anyone. When you're in the wrestling business, you watch the wrestling and you go, oh, this would be better if I did it this way. I think it's even being a football player or something. I don't know that you can actually watch it without trying to be the armchair quarterback. Don't you think that's true?
Yeah, and I had a hard time for years. You know, I would watch a show and I'd get online and I'd critique everything. And then I had two realizations. One is they're not listening to me. And two, if I was as smart as I thought I was, I'd be up there doing what they're doing. So they're smarter than me. They know stuff that I don't know. So I just shut up. And once I figured out that if I shut up, I could actually sit back and enjoy this.
Yeah, and that's what I did. I started enjoying it. Now, I won't tell you I watch every program because I only watched Raw and I watched SmackDown. I have watched All Elite Wrestling a little bit. I'm still not a big fan of their product. I think Vince McMahon is 10 times more professional wrestling than All Elite Wrestling is. I think they have a long way to go. I think they need to put Jim Ross over that, let Jim Ross run that, and let him come up with the storylines and what happens. Because, I mean, they want to talk about Vince. I mean, they just had Matt Hardy go from one place to the other and teleport himself. And And so I don't know if that's professional. I don't think that's professional wrestling. That's entertainment. So so I don't know if they can be any different. But let's get off that subject for just a minute. Let me get some more people here that's come on. Gina Gigi Gentry, hello. Thank you
Hey,
so
Gina.
much. Uh, Alton Seville said, I totally agree with that. From the late 80s until now has made wrestling pathetic. There has been times that wrestling has been pathetic. Tim Truitt, I'm here, Jack. I'm his favorite word.
He ain't lying.
All right. Has he been wrestling in Rome, Georgia for you or?
No, but we've wrestled together for years off and on. He's like me. He's ready for the nursing home, but he's actually still got a few bumps left in him.
I think I have met him once, maybe one time. I'm not for sure though. I'm getting older, so I'm forgetting this stuff.
All jokes aside, man, he's a great guy.
Jay Smith, I always give wrestling a chance today. Watch a couple of minutes here and there. Whatever happened to do just two guys locking up in wrestling without 45 kick flips off the top turnbuckle? You know, Jay, I understand what you're saying because I don't think this is what I think the problem is with the WWE or All Elite Wrestling. When I watch what they do today, they'll come in for a clothesline, and instead of following through with that clothesline, they wait till the guy ducks to make the clothesline. It's a step wrestling today. It's more of a ballet basically than it is a wrestling match. And I believe they could incorporate all that together and go to a headlock, work your way up to the next move, do your 3 or 4 or 5 high spots back to the headlock. And I think it would make the people happy that's watching wrestling today, there's wrestling fans, and maybe make the people bring in because at one time, I'm not, maybe somebody out there can make sure that I'm correct, but did not at one time in the late 90s, was not 8 to 10 million people watching wrestling every week?
I think combined, yeah.
For both wrestling. So where did these people go? Did they?
Well, that was the thing is, when Vince bought out WCW, the hope was that all of those WCW fans would now come to WWE because there was no other product. But the reality is that they just turned the TV off. They didn't go to Vince. They had their preference at WCW, and if they didn't have it, they were just, maybe, I don't know if content's the right word, but they wasn't going to go to WWE to get their fulfillment. So, the war was great while the war was going on. Yeah. But once the war was over, there were casualties everywhere.
Yeah, when I look at WCW, they made a lot of mistakes. One of the mistakes they made was they brought Eric Bischoff in, and I think at the beginning, Eric Bischoff was really good. I mean, he got rid of everybody. We were there at the time in the developmental, taking care of the developmental towns. I mean, he cut that thing out right. I mean, the moment he got there, the moment he took over, he cut the developmental towns out. But I think he came in with a great idea. He just had one idea. That was it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
He had the NWO. He never had nothing to back it up with because, and I think that's a good segue in to the territories and the booking of the territories. Most smaller territories, and I'm talking about Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, had a 3-month booking window. And they would know 12 weeks from now, we're going to end Dick Slater, Ricky Steamboat's going to end in a bunkhouse match in all the towns, and they would book themselves backwards so that they knew where they were going to go. They gave the wrestlers all the, they knew what their ending was. They knew how. So basically, it started out as an angle. So and then it became a program, and then they had the blow off, which was called the blow off. That was the basic deal, and every territory had the same thing. WWF had a 6-month run. Theirs would always run 6 months because they wouldn't run the towns a lot. Is that being done? Is there long-term booking, or are they booking today week by week, show by show?
I think they have some things planned well in advance with WWE. I think they have a general idea from one WrestleMania to the next, what they're looking for. I don't think they're as set in stone as they used to be. I think they're Vince has become more flexible in that aspect as he's gotten older, and he started listening to the crowd a little bit more. And you know, you can argue social media hurting the business or helping the business, whatever, you know, but fans really have a voice now that they never had before.
Yes.
And it's taken WWE a while to actually listen to it. And we talked about this last week about the whole Daniel Bryan deal where Vince just didn't see the future in him. But the fans were, you know, they were rabid about the guy. So he eventually had no choice but to push him. And I think he listens more. But then on the other hand, I think he cuts things a little too short sometimes because he may not see the potential in it, or you know, the talents are not getting that almost immediate response he thinks they should. Ricochet is a good example of that. He was hot, he was good, he was getting over good. He wasn't getting over great, but there was a ton of potential to him. But for whatever reason, Vince just decided to, you know, pull that plug on him.
What do you think that the people who are promoting wrestling today, and I'm talking about the independents, do you think they know the concept of what wrestling was? Do you think they understand the booking concept of it has to have an end first, and then you have a middle, and then there's do you think they understand angle, program, blow off?
Some do. You've got guys, Cubo Carmichael up in Carolinas. He's not running anything right now, but he did for years. And you know, we share the same philosophy, you know, about the business. Rudy Gonzalez is running out in Texas. He's an older guy. He's been around. He you know, uses that same style. That's what I do. And I'm telling you, guys are amazed when I set them down and I start laying out, you know, what we're doing, you know, 6-8 shows down the road with them. And they're like, well, how'd you do this? And I'm like, well, how do you not? You know, I mean, your dad is the one who set me down and showed me this, you know, wrote it out, showed me how it worked. And, you know, and that's just, I never thought about doing anything other than that because it works.
Well, I mean, that's basic writing. If you're writing a book, you're going to have the end first. And then you're gonna know how you're gonna start it. You know how you're gonna end it. And then, you know, back then the wrestlers would fill in the middle. I mean, the wrestlers would actually fill in the middle because they knew they were going to end here, so they knew what they needed to work towards. I mean, there may be a 4-week, just a little bit of more of an angle to just push it more. Then there may be another one 8 weeks, but then on that 12th week, it was going to be the blow off. And they tried to really step them out so not everything was ending at the same time. You know, and today, unfortunately, I'll notice when they do something, they end it on a month and they have to start right back over again without having anything to come back with. And I think that would help them if they would stretch some of the stuff out, not do it all, and end it all in one pay-per-view. Because I don't think every match has to be a main event match. I don't think it ever has been able to. Let me get some people. Quentin Ward, evening, folks. Thank you so much for coming on here.
Hey, Gwyneth.
Scott Ellis, why couldn't they keep WCW going as WWE was going at the same time? You know, I was there till 1996 in in a small way, just taking care of their developmental towns with my father. And I think it really came down to, you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have the wrestling knowledge to be able to do it, you won't make it. I don't care if you have billions of dollars, it doesn't matter. All Elite Wrestling can have billions of dollars, but if you don't put some wrestling knowledge to it, or at least, hey, you don't even have to have wrestling knowledge, but you got to at least have good writing knowledge, and you've got to know what you're doing. You're either a comedy or you're a drama. Don't be both. And I think WCW, they'd have guys and they didn't respect the business. I remember they say, so, oh, that's funny, but it wasn't meant to be funny. And then you would talk to the people and say, it's not supposed to be funny. This is not a joke. Because we didn't take wrestling as a joke. We took wrestling serious. It was not a joke to us. And that's the reason, by the way, that's the reason we got fired. And we wasn't there because we told them that wrestling was not a joke. We took wrestling serious, and we took the wrestling fans serious, and they did not. Most WCW officials did not like the fans, And we had a major problem with that and told them without the fans, you're nothing. And for some reason, they didn't even care if you told them that. What do you think happened at WCW?
Well, what was the point from Vince's side of it? Why? I beat them. I've already showed that our product's better. Uh, there was no real upside to it. I wish that they could have played that storyline out a little bit better and a little bit longer, but ultimately there was no future.
Yeah, I think Vince knew that it was abused so badly, especially at the end when they were putting championships on. Well, whoever that guy was, they put the championship on. I can't remember who it was now. Arquette, was it Dave Arquette or something Arquette? Yeah. They put the title on him, and they just did so many stupid things that you're never going to come back from. Because then again, WCW were trying to tell people there's some believability there, and I don't think they should ever change the product. I think that's one of the problems. They changed the product, and it's just Vince's product, and used all his people, and really and truly, I think in that respect, it made WCW look bad because you couldn't do it on your own. You had to take Vince's product and Vince's wrestlers to make it mean something, and I think Vince knew that. Let me see a couple other people. Here is Susan Renee. Hey, thank you so much, Susan. Thank you for coming on. And she agreed. I'm a little behind, so I'm hoping whatever we talked about.
Everything. She needs to agree.
There you go. That's the way Vince McMahon wants you to do. Agree with anything or you'll be fired.
And don't sneeze.
Yes, Susan Renee, not all stories have to end each time there's a pay-per-view. Give us the story, a slow burn story and carries on. Real played out rivalries that build over some time. Yes, Susan, I think that is what they're. And see, I think they could go from the 800,000 people who watch the show each week. I think that's what on average is watching the show each week now. Maybe a little bit more on Raw, but I think if they would just start developing characters, because what do people pay for? They don't really care about the wrestling match. They really don't. No. They care about when Wrestling 2 was in Atlanta, they cared about Wrestling 2. They built him where they loved him. So when the superstar came to town, they didn't have to have what Dave Messer said it was 5-star matches, because the matches meant nothing. Yeah. They were good to have, and if you had a great match, that was great. But Superstar Wrestling 2 is what drew it in there. And now they had great matches. Now, I'm not saying they didn't have great matches, but it didn't matter. Les Thornton and somebody on the first match could have the greatest match on the card. But just because Les Thornton had the greatest matches on the card didn't mean he could draw him money, because he had no personality to go with that great wrestling. And so it's always about personalities. Tommy Rich and Buzz Sawyer drew money because you put those two personalities together, and it's all about personality and stories. Now, you don't want wrestlers that are horrible by no stretch. You don't want Van Hammer, if anybody remembers him out there.
I do.
So yeah. And I think she's right. I think she's right. You have to get people engaged in the story about why do these two hate each other, the backstory like the old days. And I think that's common. And I think there needs to be a differentiation between heels and baby faces. You need to know this shades of gray. That just really doesn't work, because you're never going to. You can have a couple of those matches, but you can't have them on a daily basis. What do you think about that, Jack?
Yeah, I think one of the things we're missing, not just in storytelling from what we were to what we are now, is just that emotional investment from the crowd. It just don't seem like most of the characters today, and it's not their fault. I mentioned this, when we were talking beforehand. They're just doing what they're told, but the emphasis is on the company, not those individual wrestlers anymore. And now kids, they pick up, they like the way somebody looks, they like the way somebody dresses, and that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. But adults want to be emotionally involved, invested in those characters. That's why we still go to Star Wars. That's why we still love Indiana Jones and Rocky, and Rambo. I mean, we identify with those characters, and we want to see them, make those comebacks. And I think that's missing a lot today. You know, there's so much potential out there. Daniel Bryan is one of those few that have that connection still with fans, and you can see that when he comes out. But overall, you just don't have it.
And I think that's true. Kevin Tubbs said you have to care about one and hate the other, and they have to be able to perform. Hey, I agree. I think it's important for them to be able to wrestle, but it's not 50%. Did they have to be able to perform, because Jim Duggan wasn't the greatest wrestler in the world, but for some reason Jim Duggan could, for some reason in Louisiana, he connected with the people and really and truly had some really bad matches. Now he was on the main event. Punches looked pretty bad, but he was over. He was over for some reason, and I never really saw why. We were there for a year and a half. I never really saw why Jim Duggan was over. I know why the Rock and Roll Express was over, because them and the Midnight Express had some of the greatest matches in the history of the wrestling business. And then when Ted DiBiase worked against Hacksaw Jim Duggan, spectacular matches. I mean, they had some good matches. They didn't draw what they had done the first time. And this was 1985, I believe. They came back and Duggan got beat up in the parking lot, and they did something like that, which was another one of them unbelievable things that happened in wrestling. So they were doing them back then too, folks. And it did not draw. And unfortunately, the Dusty Rhodes Ole Anderson angle we talked about before, which was a great angle, really never drew the money that it did the first time they did it, because they jumped Dusty Rhodes in the parking lot. It never did draw the money the second time. I think it's because it made Dusty look really, really bad. I think it made him look stupid to be in the ring with 6 guys that were somebody that didn't like him in the past. So I don't think it helped Dusty out at all. And that was very surprising to us that he didn't draw. The Roddy Piper, Bob Armstrong in Georgia never drew the money it was supposed to, because people didn't know Roddy Piper was a professional wrestler. So they figured, well, Bob's going to kill him. There's a couple other things come up. At the end of the day, professional wrestling is storytelling played out in a square circle and solved with physicality. Hey, by the way, that's exactly what they say on WWE's. So if you're investing in WWE, they actually say that on there if you want to invest in their product. Israel Napier, WCW had great talent. They never knew how to use them. They had people in the wrong places. And you're right, they had people that didn't care about the business. Your older guys had compassion for the business. Today's different day, different time. I agree. Don't you agree with that, Jack?
I do.
Oh, there's old Tim Horner. Hey, Tim, how you doing?
Hey, brother.
We need to get you on here, and we need to talk to you. We're doing a show on Continental Championship Wrestling every Thursday, and I figured Mitch Lucas that is the host of that, but we do it every week, and we would like to talk to you about matches you have with Tom Pritchard, Roy Lee Welch, and a bunch of others. Tim Horner said there is no true heel or babyface anymore. Wrestling has always been good versus bad. It's just hard to distinguish who is who. And Tim Horner, you are exactly right. They just need. Let me tell you, when we used to use Jack, you knew he was a bad guy because he did bad guy stuff. He would choke you with something. He would hit you with something. He would cheat, and if he was the manager, he would really cheat during the match to get somebody over. And I think that's very important. Tim, thank you so much for coming on here and telling us about the wrestling business. There's no one that knows wrestling better than Tim Horner. Let's move on to owners for just a second. And I want to talk owners, and then I'm going to bring Mitch on, but I want to talk owners just for a second, and I want to talk about Jim Barnett. It's really because he was somebody that for years was the man in professional wrestling. There was no one any bigger than Jim Barnett in the professional wrestling business. And this was what, and I'm talking, these are the guys that came in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and there was a change of ownership that came up later on, but this was the core thing about owners back then. If Jim Barnett saw something, like, for instance, Tommy Rich was his lead babyface for many years. I mean, for years in Georgia Championship Wrestling, from probably 78 until 83, and until Barnett was read out of there. But he was his lead person. And this is what he would say. Let's say he had a program with a superstar at Drew, and then the next time he had a program with Ken Patera. So Ken Patera was there, and it wasn't drawn with Tommy Rich and Ken Patera.
Yeah.
So Jim Barnett come up to Dad. He said, "My boy, we're gonna have to get rid of Ken Patera." He says, "Well, it ain't drawn Tommy Rich is on it yet." He think, "Yeah, but he did draw. He did draw. So let's get rid of Kenny Patera." And I can't remember who was booking at the time. And I know they told him, quit putting Ken Patera in the matches with Tommy Rich. And they didn't do it. And they were also fired along with Ken Patera. That was the ownership of the companies then. It didn't have nothing to do whether they liked you, whether they were your friend. It had to whether or not you could put butts in those seats. And if you couldn't, I don't care what. If Tommy Rich could not have put people in them seats, no matter what people have said about Tommy Rich and Jim Barnett, never happened. We were there. That never happened. That never took place. He didn't get the world title shot because of that. They were just trying to give Georgia a boost to help it draw. It had nothing to do with anything, and they knew it was going to happen. All the NWA people knew it was happening. Dad drove down with the Harley race that night. All that stuff, everybody knew. The wrestlers did. No wrestler knew it. The only people who knew it was Harley Race and my dad, and Tommy only knew it that night. He didn't know it ahead of time that he was going to get the title. He knew it that night. So, but do you think that owners today, and maybe Vince does this, does he ever look at what's going on in the arenas when the arenas were run? Does he go to the arenas, or does he have anybody he sends to the arenas to look at the matches and say, "Hey, Joe's getting over"? Because Jim Barnett would do that. He would say, "Oh my boy, that Jerry Roberts is getting over a little bit." Is there no one there that watches the matches go back to Vince?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you do. You've got those producers that they hire, and that's their job, to critique and I'm sure they have forms to fill out or whatever, but I don't think Vince is quite as involved as he once was. I think he's been pulling back a lot more lately. But I tell you who's involved, and that's Triple H. Now, he watches everything from that NXT product, but he's also starting to fill in a lot of those, because Vince has missed a lot of Raw and SmackDown tapes this year. And Triple H is sitting in that position. And he pays attention. Because here's the difference. Vince was never a wrestling fan. Vince knew you could make money at wrestling, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Triple H is a fan. He always has been. He loves old school. And if you watch the product, you see the difference between NXT in that regard and what, the main WWE shows are like. So yeah, I mean, they're watched. I don't think they're paid as much attention to at this point, but I think that's going to change the more Triple H becomes, even more ingrained in being the voice behind the curtain over time. So
yeah, because back in the territory days, they would see a guy on that first match and they go, "Okay, he needs to go to the second match," and then they'd be in the booking committee and say, "Okay, he needs to go to the third match," and then before you know it, that's how Tommy Rich got there. Tommy Rich didn't get there because he got there because they watched how the people reacted to him, and that's the reason he got to that point that he got to, because otherwise they wouldn't have gave him a chance if people were just sitting there on their thumbs and going to the concession stand. I remember Jacques Rougeau. He was wrestling in Southeastern Championship Wrestling, and we really didn't mean to do this. We were just telling the truth. But he was going against a guy named Vic Raines at the time, Southeastern Championship Wrestling, maybe 1983. And he came to us after the match. He rode with us. We were living in Pensacola at the time. He came back to us. He said, hey, boys, how was my match tonight? And we said, "Oh, man, I don't know how your match was. I was in the line at the concession stand." And Dad looked over at him and said, "Well, I guess that tells you what your match was like." I'll never forget that. And I don't think it was Jacques Rougeau's fault. I think Vic Raines just wasn't going to get over it. Let me bring in Mitch Lucas and let him get on to this. And then, Mitch, how you doing there? Let me turn this off. We've got something over top of our heads over here.
Well, I'm good. I just escaped from the Firefly Funhouse. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. But I will say this. I've been listening. Since Tim Horner, I'll use Tim Horner as an example since Tim Horner chimed in a minute ago. I was told by Tommy Rich and Bob Armstrong one time that wrestling is a morality play. And if you don't have good and bad, if you don't have good and evil, it does not work. And I think that is a lot of problem of today's product is there's too much gray. There's not enough white and black. Now, since I'm your Continental guy, I'll use an example from Continental, and I'll be brief. But if you think back to '86 when Tim Horner and Roy Lee Welch were wrestling for the U.S. Junior title like it was the World Heavyweight Championship, every program meant something. If you went to the house shows, you wanted to see Roy Lee Welch get his butt whooped. If I can just be quite frank, Roy Lee Welch was the clear-cut heel in the feud. He stole the belt. He didn't win it. He put it in his bag in the locker room. If you remember Tim Horner going into the locker room to go get the belt, and one of the greatest moments in Continental that I remember. But Tim Horner was the clear-cut good guy. Roy Lee Welch was the clear-cut bad guy. And when I was there at those house shows, when I watched TV and I heard the reaction that Tim Horner was getting, it wasn't like half the crowd was rooting for Roy Lee Welch. It was about 100% for Tim Horner and 100% against Roy Lee Welch. To me, when wrestling lost its way a little bit back in the 90s is when everybody cheated. There was no clear-cut face, no clear-cut heel. And that's how I think we kind of lost our way and got down the wrong path.
I agree with you. I agree. Let me get some people here. Paul Hatchett, if all three people in the ring, referee and wrestlers, do their job, it'll get over. And fans come back. Without fans, wrestling is nothing. You are correct. There has been, we have told this and told wrestlers over and over again in our lifetimes, without those people sitting in that crowd, you are nothing. And I think it does help to be a wrestling fan first before you get into wrestling business, before you're a wrestler, because if not, you really don't understand the wrestling business. You don't understand why I'm doing this to do this. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're a WWE wrestler, I'm telling you, you're just doing what you're told, and we understand. But if you're on an independent level, you really need to go back, watch old wrestling tapes, and do it that way first. Learn how to do it that way first. And then when you get to WWE, it doesn't matter because you're going to spend 3 years in the developmental place anyway. So they're going to reteach you everything, but at least you'll know the basics of wrestling. And if you want to be taught how to wrestle good, Tom Pritchard has a school, and that's where you need to go to learn professional wrestling because there's no doubt he can do that. Let me ask Jack this question, and is there a time in WWE today, and I don't keep up with it as much as Jack does, but can they get heat on television now?
They can, but it's not like what we used to do. And that's because wrestling in general, not just WWE, I'm not pointing finger at them, but wrestling in general has turned to the cool heels. You know, I really think that started with WCW and the NWO. That was cool. It was. I bought into it too. But I think we lost that element along the way. And I think that's one thing that's really missing. I will give AEW props because they've got this guy, MJF. Is that what he goes by? Now that's a heel.
Maxwell Jacob Friedman.
That's one of the best heels I have seen in 20 years.
Now,
he does not like anybody. And 24 hours a day, I don't care where you see him at. And there's videos posted of where he does appearances, you know. He'll make kids cry.
He lives it.
I mean, legitimate heel.
Is he the one that shot?
And he has he. Did what?
Is he the one that shot the bird at the kid?
Yes.
He said, "Oh, okay."
I don't approve of that, but I mean that's in line with their product. So,
That's what we would call the wrong kind of heat. There's a difference between heat and the wrong kind of heat. We used to tell Paulie Dangerously when he was in Continental, we'd say the heat you're trying to get is the wrong kind of heat. Anyone can get that heat, which was called cheap heat. Yeah. Cheap heat is getting on the mic, and I've seen this done on a lot of independent levels, and get on there and say, "You rednecks." Well, anybody can say that.
Yeah.
Now let us show you how to get that heat in the match without calling anybody any names. And you won't really and truly, a heel wants everyone to love him. They're doing nothing wrong. A true heel does not believe he's done anything wrong. Everything he did because he had to do it.
A true heel is justified in his actions.
Yes.
Your daddy told me that.
and that's the way it should always be. If you cheat, you need to run out of there like you have stole the keys to your grandma's car and you're going to go and leave somewhere. If you've cheated in that match, you need to leave that match right then and there. Don't wait for it. You know, you wouldn't steal something at a store and just stay around outside. You would leave. And that's the way we Dad always said, listen, tonight you're going to do the deal. We're going to take the belt off of you. But when you hit that, whatever you're doing with, you get out of there, because I want you to run out of that building. And I think that's a lost thing now. People cheat and they'll stay there for the next 25 minutes. And everybody's got to go to that second or top rope.
Yeah.
I'd outlaw that. The first time, if I was in WWE, I said, not one person goes to that except for the 2 or 3 people we tell to do it, because it's done every match. Every match it is done. And at least once they're going to do a flying out of the ring onto somebody. At least once in every match they're going to do it. I'm getting a little behind on people really quick. Let me try to pick up on the people here. I remember Norvell Austin working back in the 70s, Knoxville. He could walk out with some heat with Don Carson. Well, Don Carson was a heat hitter. Did y'all ever get to see him?
Yeah,
a little bit.
Saw some tapes. I never saw him in person.
He could get heat not only for the fans, but the wrestlers as well. No, Don was a good guy. I have to say Don was a guy. He was from our hometown here. What Goldberg got beat by Braun Strowman. Oh, that's right. He did win that. He did win that, whatever that title is he has. I think that he got 45 titles in WWE now.
It seems like it.
I mean, everybody's got a championship, but you can't say nothing. Continental had a championship from top to bottom. If you remember, there was an Alabama champion, Southeastern champion, junior champion, front row champion. There was a bunch of champions there as well. So you can't really say nothing about that. Where other bad guys like Freddie Blassie, people wanted to stab them, and old ladies would hit them with loaded purses. Yes, I've seen that happen in Chattanooga, Tennessee, actually. Bill Dundee got hit by one. Tojo Yamamoto actually got knocked out by one in Chattanooga Memorial Auditorium.
I had a couple of grannies throw punches at me, too. So,
Well, hey, they got into wrestling. And it's funny because they were the same people. I remember in Chattanooga, when Tojo knocked that lady out, I was probably about 8 years old. And I can remember when he got knocked out, the lady said, "I don't want to not come back." They said, Nick Goulas, he wasn't going to give up that because they wasn't really doing good business then anyway. But she actually had a big old brick in that thing and knocked out Tojo Yamamoto. Let's see. North Georgia Wrestling Alliance. Best examples of justification for a hero, I thought, was the Freebirds versus Divine Erics. That is true because everything they said, and that's true. Let's talk about that just for a second. Tim Horner was talking about Don Carson. He would get some heat, and Tim should know because he watched him in Knoxville, Tennessee. Don Carson was something else. Let's go back to the Freebird thing. Peanut butter. Do you know what he's talking about?
No.
You don't have to explain that, Tim. You're either going to have to come on here and talk to us one night. I'll have to explain that one somewhere down the line. I don't think none of us really know what that means, but only you know what that means. Let's go back to this right for a minute and talk about the Freebirds. They did believe they were justified in what they did.
Yes.
And I think that was the thing. The superstar thought he was justified when he came to Atlanta. He thought he was justified. You know what? And the guys believed it. That was the thing. They believed what they were doing. You can tell the guys today, they don't particularly believe in what they're doing. The guys back there would believe in what they were doing, especially Superstar Wrestling 2. The reason they believed it because they would beat each other really bad during the match. I remember Wrestling 2 telling us, man, I had a hard time getting up the next day. I mean, that's how believable they were watching. Hey, Charlie Platt, hello. Thank you so much.
Right.
Charlie Platt, the voice of Southeastern Championship Wrestling, also the Continental Wrestling Federation in 1980. I think he came back in 88.
88 and 89.
Oh, Stephanie Wood said Carson had a loaded glove. He would call peanut butter.
I got you.
Now that makes more sense. Well, I thought it was. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what that meant. Larry Bebop Hatchcock. I like a cheap plug, Jack Lord.
Okay, Bebop is one of the cheapest people I know. There you go.
There you go, Larry. Yeah. At least he said, there you go. Tim said the glove Don Carson wore, he called it peanut butter. You know, Don Carson was so great. He'd get beat, and he's about like Don and Ron Wright. They'd get beat every week, but they'd get Don Carson come up there and said, well, last week there, that auditorium, I beat that man so bad. And then the announcer would say, man, you didn't beat him. Yes, I did. He would lie and lie and lie. Don Carson was a good wrestler. Charlie Platt let us know that peanut butter was the loaded glove as well. You know, I want to talk a little bit as well. We've talked about let's talk about the booker for just a second, and how important the booker was in the process of either making the product great or making it not so great. And there has been a lot of, and sometimes maybe not always the booker's fault. Maybe he didn't have the talent that he wanted, because every booker would bring their own talent in. It wasn't like if Jack is going down to Center, Alabama to book a place, and there's other talent there. Jack, you're going to bring your own guys. Am I correct?
Yeah. Yeah, because I have turned down a lot of opportunities simply because the promoter said, no, I've got guys. I don't need you to bring your guys. Without my guys, my booking abilities are so limited that it's not worth my time going down and doing it. So,
because when Bill Dundee was brought to Mid-South Wrestling, when he was brought at that time to Mid-South Wrestling, Jerry Jarrett said, listen, I'm going to give you the Rock and Roll Express. I'm going to send you the Midnight Express, Terry Taylor, a couple of other guys. I think Buddy Landell, he may have already been there. I'm not for sure. But the people that he sent said, listen, you won't know what to do with them because you're only used to using big guys. So we need to be able to get them to be able to do something. So they brought Bill Dundee with them. And then Bill Dundee started bringing all his people, trying to get rid of, for a long time, he tried to get rid of the Junkyard Dog. And he was glad when he left, because you couldn't do anything there. Any kind of heat you would get, everybody hired Junkyard Dog, JYD. So you couldn't get anyone else over, because if Junkyard Dog didn't come out there to save someone, they were let down by it. They wanted to see Junkyard Dog be the big savior. And so he was glad when he left. But booking can get a little bit, if you ain't careful, and we've seen it happen, booking can get to where you do the same thing over and over and over again. And we've seen that before in professional wrestling. Let me ask you, I want to go back just for a moment to the WWE, and I want to see if I can understand, because Jack says he understands, that he may understand the Firefly, because Mitch, you were talking about it. I want to ask Mitch first. What was that? Because I'm not for sure.
I don't want to offend anybody, but I want to say it was sort of an ego trip. I did not. I don't know. I guess I'm too old school. I know what has been said over the last couple of days. Who kind of led the buildup of the match, and who had the ideas and the framework for it. I know that they allowed John Cena to come in and change a few things, but leave the basic ideas. I was actually surprised when at the end of the match and they cut back to the studio, it was said that I don't know what I just saw. I was sort of thinking that myself. I don't know what I just saw, but if I'm going to beat up WWE for the Firefly Funhouse match, that's hard to say, first of all. If I'm going to beat them up for that, then I got to beat up AEW for teleporting Matt Hardy from the upper deck to the bottom deck during the promo with Chris Jericho. I don't know. I guess my mind is not open enough. I'm not into that as I'm more of a wrestling fan instead of the sports entertainment. Some of it I can handle. I'm still waiting on Bray Wyatt to come through and do some things that are something I can understand.
Yeah, I think he has it. Okay, Jack. You said someone explained this to you.
Yeah.
I think we all want to know what it means because I have no clue.
I've been scrolling through my iPad to actually pull up what he sent. This is Parker Stevens, a young guy that wrestles for me. That ton of potential in this kid. But anyway, he said when I posted, I don't know that I disliked it. I just don't understand it. And he said, "I got you, boss." He said, Cena became a fan during the Saturday night main event days. He said he started training while NWO was killing it in WCW. He debuted against Kurt Angle during the Ruthless Aggression era. His word life gimmick is what first got him over. He was overly booked in several feuds and angles. That's why Bray keeps calling him Superman. And at the end of the promo, when Cena called Bray overhyped, overvalued, etc., he was actually talking about himself. John Cena was wrestling himself and his past mistakes during that match. And,
Well, that makes sense. That makes sense because he did have some stupid gimmicks, so I can't say that, that thing wasn't too good itself, but I can't say nothing about professional wrestling because let me tell you, I said this many years ago, and these was my exact words. That stupid rock elbow thing will never get over. And guess what? It got over. I didn't think it would, but it did. So I'm not going to say, hey, listen, this could bring a whole new group of wrestling fans, or at least sports entertainment fans. There is a place for professional wrestling. So Ring of Honor, listen, you have the chance to produce wrestling. And they are wrestling fans out there. There's over 6,500 followers on this page alone. Those are wrestling fans. Because I'm going to tell you, you talk a little bit about WWE. They're not real big fans of the WWE, the people on this. There are some, but the majority of them don't like it because I think we all want to see wrestling. You can put entertainment into wrestling, but still have wrestling matches that make sense. They're not completely out there left field. Now, will it work for Vince McMahon? Yes. I mean, let's remember, was it Paul and Vachon that got married on Tuesday Night Titans? The little midget that got hit, just our little person that got hit, and it started back then and it just went crazy ever since. But I still watch it. I still watch WWE. I still think they're the best product out there. They still have the best product. They still stay as close to wrestling as some do. I don't think there's some that don't even know what. Ring of Honor, you need some help. You probably need to call either me or Jack. Listen, your product's not really good. So
they have got some great talent.
Yes, they do.
They really do.
They just need to be able to put them into some storylines and put them together to make them work because I think it's just the way they book it for some reason. I think they'll book 12 matches and that's how they do it. They'll do 4 matches on tape number 1. And I don't think that's ever going to get over for them. You never can get somebody over that way. You're going to have to do it differently. But that's the only place I think that's the only company I think that can actually present professional wrestling different than what's being produced on the 2 other, because A&W is not, people don't need to tell themselves they're producing professional wrestling because they're not. So, but somebody out there can produce professional wrestling, and I think it would do very well. I think that 800,000 could turn into 2 or 3 million in no time. Just give a product that is believable. People ain't going to ever believe it, but you can make them believe it while they're watching it.
Well, they believe Star Wars, so
this is true.
They're looking for a reason to believe.
Wrestling
They
is
know it's not real, but they want to believe. They really
wrestling is only as good as its story. If matches for the sake of matches does not work.
No. Let's. What gets me is finishers being used more than once in a match. Finishers is just a finisher. I agree with you, but that did start way back in the NWA. They would people would use their finishes as a high spot, and that should never be done. And other people would be using their finishes in the matches. I remember Scott Armstrong had the super kick, and the next thing you know, there'd be 3 other matches use the super kick as a high spot. So that was done. That is a Booker's problem, and that somebody's got to do that. Israel said Ron Wright had his loaded boot. Yes, I remember that. Lake Pursuit Pringle was also a great one for getting heat, not only as Pringle, but as now it's went blank with me. What was his other gimmick there for Paul Bearer?
Paul Bearer. Yeah.
Hello, gentlemen. Kenneth Hopkins. Hello, Kenneth. Thank you for being on here.
Hey, Ken.
Let's see. Susan Renee talked about the thump. I believe that was that when we were talking about
JYD.
Junkyard Dog. Donovan Graham, J.C. Dykes, and his Yankees caused riots in the South. Not only was it the Yankees, but the Dominoes, the Infernos. My middle name is Dykes. I was named after J.C. Dykes. J.C. Dykes is the person who started my father in the wrestling business. My dad started in 1962. He was helping put up the ring with J.C. Dykes. A wrestler didn't show up. And so when he didn't show up, they needed a referee. Dad was there. He was not smart when he started. He did not know. They did not tell him anything about the wrestling business. He got in there and refereed. And from that point on, from 1962 at 14 years old until I think it was 1996, 33 years, my dad was in professional wrestling. And he spent a long time in it. And because Jimmy did get him started when I was born in 1970, he called me Brent Dykes West. So Jimmy Dykes, he was he had a bunch of stuff at one time we were supposed to go pick up, but we never picked up. There was actually a loaded boot, and it was actually made, and there was a little piece that would go back and forth. Actually, when they would hit it, they actually had a loaded boot. So he threw it in the garbage. We could have had that loaded boot. Let's see. Hey, guys, and not everyone is a superstar. A finisher should end the match. William Riley, I agree with you. We'll go with one more. Get back to heel and baby faces. Nobody really can tell who your heels really are. They don't keep a good heel strong anymore. Let me ask you this. I'm going to ask this question because Mitch was talking about it. Is it possible with sponsors to get heat? Will they get mad if people really get mad today? Will the sponsors get mad at Vince?
I guess it depends on how far you push it. That's ironic that we're talking about this after what I watched last night. Do you remember the Clash of Champions when they filmed Terry Funk supposedly in the hospital in Alexandria, Louisiana, and he waved his finger at the crowd and said, "Don't you turn your dial off WTBS because I'm going to be there later tonight in the Clash." And he came out and put a plastic bag over Ric Flair's head, if you remember that, and tied it off. And they they went to commercial, came back. The medics were down there like they were giving CPR to Ric Flair, trying to revive him and whatnot as the program went off. And on the next WCW, back then it was not WCW Saturday Night. It was still World Championship Wrestling, the program. But Terry Funk actually issued a brief apology during a promo and said something to the effect of, "Don't you kids ever do anything like I went too far. Don't do that." But I think you can still get away with it without absolutely going over the top. I think there's ways to do that. One popular way right now, and I'll say this, and I'll get out of the way for you guys, but one popular way right now to get heat seems to be to you were talking a little bit ago about it. There's always a dive move in the WWE. There's always somebody jumping out on somebody else on the announce table or whatever. Almost every big pay-per-view now, they have somebody take a big, huge fall, You know, in WrestleMania with Kevin Owens jumping off the sign. They've done it with Jeff Hardy numerous times. If you break anybody on top of anything, apparently that gets heat. I'm not really sure that you can get it in the old school way anymore. I get without the advertising. That's a good question.
What do you think, Jack? Can
I don't know. Advertisers are fickle. If y'all remember when Daniel Bryan was first getting his push up there, what was that? Nexus, was that the group they had, I think? And he choked the ring announcer with his own tie. Mm-hmm. And sponsors went crazy. And Vince wound up firing him over. You know, I mean, something that we would have done on every show was suddenly something you get fired over. You know, and so
maybe they don't get the heat today because without the sponsors, they're not in business. Yeah. I mean, let's just be honest with ourselves.
Yeah, and it kind of surprises me too that, you know, they've started using adult language on WWE now, which I'm not a fan of. I also understand I'm not the demographic they're looking for. But to me, if I were Snickers, I wouldn't be happy with that. No. Because honestly, adults are going to eat Snickers, but I still think kids are your target audience for some of those sponsors.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I don't know. You know, that's me. Like I say, though, I'm not the target audience. So
Tim Warner said, when I was an agent producer at WWE, I told some talent then that they couldn't have been in the business 20 years ago. There was times I met the wrestler I was working with in the ring. Couldn't talk about your match before. They looked at me like I had two heads. That was the art of the business. You know, we found that. You know, I found that, and I would have. I don't know how long ago it was now that I did wrestling show, the last wrestling show I did. But they would look at you basically and say, just like Tim Horner said, we would tell them, so listen, a guy was doing some kicks, and I went to him and I said, listen, just don't kick. Just don't do it. You know, they look horrible. Don't do it. Well, everybody knows the wrestling business is a work. And I'm thinking, but you know what? Everybody knows that Superman is too. But if you saw the lines on top of him when he was flying, you wouldn't want to go buy a ticket to see that. Yeah, I understand that. But I don't want to make a bad B movie. And I think what he's saying is true. They want to go through every move that they do. Well, if it's not working, then the fans is just going to sit there and they're going to start hurling boring. I don't care if you do 45,000 spots in that match. I don't care what you do. If you're not telling a story out there, Rocket Monroe set me down one time, and I thought I knew the wrestling business. I was a young kid. From 76 to so on, I knew about what was going on in the wrestling. I thought I knew until Rocket Monroe sat me down and told me about the wrestling business. And that was one smart man. So why don't you listen to the older guys? They'll be able to teach you something. And then the next guy will teach you something else. And the next guy will teach you something else. So if you're a professional wrestler out there, listen, watch tapes, learn the wrestling business. Because if you'll learn it, it can be good to you. You can make some money at it. Yeah. One of the day you may get to the WWE. Now you're going to have to work different when you get there because you're going to be told everything to do. From the time you step outside your motel room, you're going to be told what to do. Let's see some other people. Michael Shea Crosby said Skandar Akbar with Kamala burning hacksaw in Mississippi. Yes, we were there. That got some great heat. James Meek said it's not wrestling anymore, it's sports entertainment. I wish wrestling was like it when I was a kid. 10,000 people in the Memorial Auditorium in Chattanooga to see Randy Savage versus Dutch Mantel. I think that was at the UTC Arena, right? Was that where that was? Not the Memorial Auditorium. The Fargo's back to Nashville Fairgrounds, and also Nick Goulas back in the 70s. They would run on a Thursday, come right back on a Saturday, and run and sell out both shows. So wrestling was bigger back in the 70s and 80s, and maybe even in the 60s, because I think in the 60s when they used to run Thursdays, and Dad, we used to talk about that. We're going to do a couple more, and then we're going to have to get off of here, but I'm a little behind on here. Todd Mayo, the problem, one of many, is the boys do not have the territories to hone their craft and learn their ring psychology.
I agree.
That is true. I don't know if they know what ring psychology is, and we will have to talk about ring psychology and what it really means. Also, the booking of the psychology, because the booking has something to do with psychology as well. Because if you do something on 1, 2, and 3, and a guy chokes a guy down and beats a guy and gets disqualified, well, when you do that on week 8 with the guy that you're really wanting to draw the money with, he's choking the guy and he's showing the guy. By that time, the people should be standing, because you have built that he will choke the guy until he's down and out. He don't care if he gets disqualified or not. So you build to no disqualification match, the whole. Which we're going to have to go through a whole show of that, because I'm not for sure even the big companies that understand the psychology when it comes to building something. Now, Pat Patterson did, Terry Garvin did, those guys did, but I don't think the riders of today, I don't think they get that. Tim Truitt, when I was coming through the ranks, you didn't do what other matches did. You always did something different. That is true. You did not do the same matches, and today you do see the same matches over and over again. I remember Homer Odell had good. He was a manager back in the 70s. Did y'all see Homer Odell?
No, I never got to see.
You ever see him? He had the helmet. He had used that helmet and hit people with it. Homer Odell was great. Too many of the dives out. Too many dives outside the ring. Yes, too many dives outside the ring. If I was in WWE, I'd tell them, don't do that. Don't do that unless we tell you to do that. That should only be certain people doing it, and it shouldn't be every match. I mean, because what happens if you do everything in one night? What do people look forward to? I mean, there's no reason to watch the show each week, because they're going to do the same moves and the same wrestling match each and every week. So Cheryl Weather Knox, Hybrid West. Hi, Cheryl. How are you doing? Cheryl Weathers' father, Tommy Weathers. One of the greatest referees in professional wrestling.
Love Tommy.
Yeah, Tommy was a great guy. One of the best guys and one of the best referees in the business. Knew the business, understood the business, and understood how the business worked. Susan Renee, you have to make them believe it. Even if it's just time, the match is going on, make them believe it. Yes, I think if they would do that, I truly believe if they would make people believe it, I believe it would go from the 800,000 to the 3 or 4 million. Don't do stupid stuff, because wrestling fans are not stupid, and they're not even going to watch something free. Time is as important as money, and I don't think they're going to watch something. Give them a storyline. Give them a story. I don't even see a storyline anymore. Unless it's the same one, like we're going over real quick, but I got to ask this question: why did they do the same storyline with Edge and his wife and the Undertaker and his wife? Can anybody answer that question for me?
I think it was easy.
I mean, why they're paying these riders, these guys, $150,000, $200,000 a year? You couldn't come up with something better than that.
You gotta remember too that the riders are not from wrestling. They're not wrestling fans. They're hired outside the business for their abilities to do scripts and stuff like that in Hollywood. You don't really, I mean, till it gets to the actual producers of the matches, those are the old school guys that understand, but they're limited, on what they can change about anything. So.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to give the wrestlers a little bit more to be able to produce their own gimmicks, their own personality, so they don't have everybody the same. I mean, every wrestler is the same, and and not everybody has to have music and fireworks, and they could pay all 3 of us good money. We could just watch their show for what they're paying for.
If they had,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, if they had controlled things as tightly in the 90s as they do now, there never would have been a Stone Cold Steve Austin, because Stone Cold Steve Austin was basically Steve Austin amped up on steroids. And I don't mean physical. I mean, you know what I'm saying? He was himself, and he was taking it to the nth degree. And I've heard dozens and dozens and dozens of people in this business say that if you meet Nature Boy Ric Flair, you've met Ric Flair. He's living that. Today it's too confined, too overscripted, and that's how you end up getting duplicate storylines like AJ Styles calling The Undertaker Mark Calloway and referring to Michelle McCool, and then bringing Beth Phoenix on and duplicating similar things with Edge.
Now, what was you going to say, Jack?
Oh, I was just going when you were making the remark about us watching the shows and critiquing them. Dusty told me that at one time they hired him to do that, to sit at home and watch the show and make notes and send those in. And he said, I did that for a long time. And he said, I got good checks. And he said, I don't think anybody ever read my
notes. They probably didn't. They didn't really want to hear. Jim Barnett was hired for years to do it. And Jim used to tell Dad, he says, they've just paid me for years. And I don't think they've done anything, I told them. And without Jim Barnett, WWF would have never gotten to the place they were at. Jim Barnett's the one that helped them get to there because he knew all the territories, how they worked, the way they worked, and he knew the players and who the players was and how to work them against each other. Jim Barnett, no matter what, he doesn't get any credit for that because Vince is going to take it all. But Jim Barnett is the one that knew all the wrestling promoters, and he knew how to put them down. That's just, he knew how to do it. Terry said, I'm sorry, but when I was coming up, I was told it's not about you and me. It's about those people that I think he's been paid to see us, and I still preach it. Yes, it is about the wrestling fan. And if something's not getting over, change it. Don't keep on doing it. Don't beat a dead horse. Just get rid of it. To take the guy from the third match, put him in the main event, especially if the guy in the main event's not drawing you any money. I don't care if he's your best friend or he's your brother-in-law or he's your brother. Get rid of him, put him in the first match, let him sell popcorn, but just don't leave him on the main event. Cheryl Weathers-Knox, do you remember when we had a wrestling ring in the backyard? Yes, I do remember the wrestling ring in the backyard. We used to have some great matches, and Cheryl would always beat us. We never won a match. We always did the job for Cheryl. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, they used to have a wrestling ring in the back of their house, so we used to go down there and wrestle all the time. We used to have backyard wrestling matches. I mean, so many backyard wrestling matches. And me and my brother would always, the Andersons was our big deal. And once we got your arm, you were done. You were not going to win. Let me get through these real fast. Do you think masked wrestlers will make a comeback?
They could.
Yeah.
They could.
I think they're,
one of the most popular masked wrestlers out there. I think if they're marketed right, and I think there's a lot of mismarketing opportunities by not having.
James Meek says they're running out of ideals. Do you think that's it? Do you think they're running out of ideals?
Well, here's the thing, and it's wrestling has always been recycled ideas. It's just tweaking them, changing them a little bit. There's still plenty of original ideas. I think they're just getting lazy, and that when they recycle now, they're not tweaking. They're just flat. I'm waiting for them to redo the Randy Savage Elizabeth marriage deal again at some point. And not just and do that digitally, insert different people's faces on the tape to make it easier.
It's funny because really, when you think about that, there's so much stuff that happened in the wrestling business, great angles, great programs from the 60s and 70s that they're missing out on that could be redone, that could draw them a ton of money. But there's nobody there.
Because I'm still doing them, so y'all.
Yeah, okay, well, all right. Mitch, the proposal we sent out to Vince, we're just going to have to take that back down.
All right, we'll just go back to the drawing board.
We'll go back to the drawing board. We'll just try to do us a television program on Netflix. Just like Hollywood today, remake. They need writers who know wrestling. I agree. I think they need to start looking at old Florida, Memphis, and Mid-South shows. Yes, they do. But
they got Memphis, libraries.
Now they don't own Memphis's.
That's right. That's right.
I don't think they have. I know they have.
I think Continental and Memphis and Oregon are the three big ones that they don't own.
And I think doesn't Jarrett have a called Jarrett Parsons TV or something now?
Yeah.
That you can watch something on. Stuart Bailey, a lot of wrestlers now are interchangeable. Same look, same style, same type of music. Yes, they all wrestle alike. The duck and clothesline, that's what I see. It's all a bunch of it's almost like watching a video game. I think it's video game wrestling. I really miss the territories, And I think we'll end it right there with that. Jack, you have any closing statements?
Hi. No.
How about you, Mitch? You got anything you'd like to add before we
Yeah, everybody check us out on Thursday night for the Continental Show. Now you'll need to tell them the time.
It'll be 7:30 Eastern Standard Time, 6:30 Central Time. And next week, right here at the same time, we will be looking at Brad Armstrong again. We'll do part two.
Right.
We'll pick up when he wins the national heavyweight title from Ted DiBiase, and then we'll talk about his reign as the North American champion. And we'll talk a little bit about how that came about, why he was brought in, and a lot of things I have read about it. They've said stuff about, he was brought in because he was on TBS. And well, there's a lot of story to that, and we'll tell that story next week right here on Pro Wrestling Inside and Out. Guys, thank you so much for being a part of this. Before we leave, let me get Tim Horner back in here. He says, all ratings and numbers, shoot an angle at 9, blow it off at 11. This is true. This is true. They need to build it from week to week. They need to stop that. That has been I really believe they can go. I think you can get back to 4 or 5 million people. I really do believe it. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Check us out Thursday. And if you can't check us out Thursday, check us out next week's 7:30. We'll talk Brad Armstrong next week right here on Pro Wrestling Inside and Out.